Today I'm making a fresh milled flour Italian herb bread right in the bread machine. This recipe combines the nutrition and freshness of home milled flour with the convenience of the bread machine. So if you need a change from the classic fresh milled flour honey wheat bread, give this fresh milled flour Italian herb bread a try. It is so flavorful. You can make this entirely in the bread machine or you can use your dough cycle. Down in the printable recipe, I'll leave you instructions for both. Let's just get started on this really easy fresh milled flour bread machine recipe. To make this absolutely delicious Italian herb bread made with fresh milled flour in the bread machine, I'm going to get started with 1.5 cups or 355 grams of lukewarm water. You want this to be about 100 to 110 degrees. Just putting that right on into my bread machine loaf pan. Definitely get your loaf pan out of your bread machine so that you don't have any spills and make a big mess in your bread machine. This is my Zojirushi Home Bakery Supreme bread machine. I love this bread machine. It is so good for fresh milled flours. Now, after our water, then we want 3 tablespoons of melted butter. Now, you can use melted butter or oil. A lot of times I'll use olive oil in this recipe because it just goes really well with the Italian seasoning. But you can use melted butter or any kind of oil that you want to use. So this is 3 tablespoons or about 40 grams of melted butter or oil. That'll work just fine in this recipe. My butter was a little bit more melted not too long ago. Now, after you add your oil or your butter, then we want 1 teaspoon of sugar. You can also use honey, maple syrup, molasses, anything you want to use, but this just helps feed our yeast. You can get away with not adding any sweetener at all if you want to, but it does help with our yeast. So I'm adding 1 teaspoon or 5 grams of sugar. Now, just a few minutes ago, I got out my Nutri-Mill Classic Grain Mill and my hard winter white wheat berries, and I ground it into this fresh milled flour. This was 500 grams of berries, and it's milled into 500 grams of fresh milled flour. It weighs the same after you grind it. So this was about 2 2/3 cups of wheat berries, and this gives you about 4.5 cups of fresh milled flour once it's ground. So I'm going to add this right on into my bread machine loaf pan. So this is 500 grams or about 4.5 cups of fresh milled flour. Now, I have lots and lots and lots of hard winter white wheat and red wheat berries stored in my food storage, so that's mainly what I use. But sometimes I'll add maybe 1/4 of kamut or spelt, anything like that. A good ancient grain will make this bread really good too. So feel free to add a little bit of that if you want to. After adding my fresh milled flour, now I'm going to add a couple optional ingredients. I love using Vital Wheat gluten and dough enhancer in my fresh milled flour breads. For years, I resisted it. I didn't try it, and then I tried it, and I really like my breads better with this Vital Wheat gluten. So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of Vital Wheat gluten, but like I said, this is totally optional, but it will help with the rise, the texture, the crumb. Oh, it just makes it nice and smooth. So I like this. So 1 tablespoon of Vital Wheat gluten, and I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon of dough enhancer. This just helps your rise, the texture, all of that. But you do not have to add this if you don't want to. 1 teaspoon of dough enhancer. And I've used lots of different brands over the years. They're all about the same. And I keep mine in the freezer and I get it out right in time to make bread. I use it and I throw it back in the freezer. Now it's time to add some Italian seasoning. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of this Italian seasoning. This gives the bread so much good flavor. But you can choose how much you want to add. Maybe you don't want that much flavor, you can add 1 tablespoon and start with that, but I think it's really good with 2 tablespoons. And this will just disperse through the entire loaf and give it such good flavor. Now it's time to add the salt. I love this Redmond's Real Salt. It's an unrefined ancient sea salt, and it comes from North America, which is pretty neat. But I'm going to use 1 teaspoon of this salt. Definitely don't pour it over your bread machine loaf pan, or you might over pour it and have really salty bread or just totally ruin it. So I'm going to add this salt right on in there. And those are all of the ingredients I'm going to add right now. I'm going to autolyse this bread machine fresh milled flour bread. And what that does is you just mix all of the ingredients except the yeast. So don't add your yeast yet. And it lets your bran absorb some water and it lets it become softer. You're going to get a better crumb, better texture out of your fresh milled flour breads if you do an autolyse. Now you can do an autolyse anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 hours. I like doing mine about 45 minutes, but it is flexible. You can work it into your day. Now I'm going to go ahead and throw this into my bread machine and I'll show you the next steps. When I make fresh milled flour breads in my bread machine, I sometimes use the basic white cycle and sometimes I use the wheat cycle, and I haven't found very much of a difference between the two. But I usually make this loaf using the wheat cycle, so that's what I'm going to do today. It's about 3 hours long. I have my preheat turned off on my Zozurashi. A lot of bread machines don't have the option to have a preheat, and I like getting my dough to mix and knead right away, so I like turning it off. So if you have a Zozurashi, there is the option of turning your preheat off. Okay, now that I have that all set, I'm going to press start, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the machine mix up my ingredients just for about 3 minutes. That'll get everything really well incorporated. And then I'm going to turn off my bread machine and I'm going to let it sit in autolyse. You can do anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 hours. I usually like doing about a 45-minute autolyse, just depending on my day. Now, before I get this turned off, I'm going to go ahead and get all of these ingredients all incorporated into this ball of dough. Now that all the ingredients are really well mixed up, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my bread machine. I'm going to hold down this reset button until it turns off. Okay, now I'm going to just shut the door, let this sit in autolyse, and then it'll be time to add our yeast. I've let my dough autolyse for about 45 minutes, and this is what it looks like. Now it's time to add the yeast. Do not forget to add your yeast, or your bread is not going to turn out at all. You're going to wonder what happened to it. Now this is my SAF instant yeast. It does work better, since all of our ingredients are already incorporated, to add instant yeast instead of active dry yeast. But you know what? I've used both and it works just fine if you only have active dry yeast. But I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons or about 5 grams of this SAF instant yeast. This is another thing that I keep in my freezer and get out right in time to make bread and put it right back in. This is a big 1-pound container of yeast. It's definitely more economical to buy it like this than in those little packets and little jars. Okay, now that I have my yeast in there, I'm going to press start. Now I'm going to let this bread machine do its thing. All of this yeast is going to get incorporated into this ball of dough as it mixes and kneads. I like the look of my ball of dough. It doesn't look too wet, doesn't look too dry. If yours looks a little bit wet and it's sticking to the paddles and to the sides, then add about a tablespoon more of fresh milled flour at a time until it comes together into a nice ball of dough. If yours is looking really, really dry and crumbly after a few minutes of mixing, then add maybe a tablespoon of water, give it a few minutes to mix up and reassess. But this looks great. I'm going to go ahead and shut the door and let my bread machine work its magic. And in 3 hours, I'm going to have a beautiful loaf of fresh milled flour Italian herb bread. It's been 3 hours and our fresh milled flour Italian herb bread made entirely in the bread machine is ready. Look how good this looks. Now, if I'm home, I like to get my bread out of the bread machine and out of the loaf pan immediately after the cycle is complete. I just let my crust better that way. It doesn't get soggy when it's cooling. So if you're home, get it out right away. Now, look how good this looks. It has a beautiful golden color. The crust looks fantastic. I can't wait to cut into this loaf of bread and see all of those Italian herbs inside. Now, what I like to do is I like to spread a little bit of melted butter on top of my bread. So I have my cast iron melting pot again. I just melted a tiny bit of butter in it. And I'm just going to brush this butter on top of my Italian herb bread. This will give you that really good hint of buttery flavor with it. And it'll give you a softer crust, which is what I'm really after. I also love that shine that it gives it. It really finishes off your bread. This is, of course, a totally optional step, but I think it really does make a big difference. The next thing that I do that's a little bit different is that I don't like to put my bread on a cooling rack to cool. Instead, I like to wrap my bread in a tea towel. And all that warmth, that condensation will give you a really good soft crust. And I feel like it helps keep my bread fresher longer. So I'm going to let this cool off just for a little bit, and then we'll slice into it. Okay, my bread has been cooling just for about 20 minutes, and I am more than ready to slice into this gorgeous loaf of bread. This looks so good to me. Now, I didn't take my paddles out. You are more than welcome to do that, but I hardly ever do that. I do not mind the holes on the bottom of my bread from the bread machine. What I don't like is after I make this fantastic bread is squishing it as I cut into it. So I love to use these bread bow knives. It really helps you not squish your bread as you slice into it. With the Italian herbs baked right into each bite of this bread, it makes it so good for really flavorful sandwiches. It goes great with any Italian dishes like pasta, soups, salads. And look at the texture and the crumb of this bread. This is fantastic fresh milled flour bread. These beeswax bread bags are what I use to keep our loaves fresh here on the farm. They're simple, natural, and they really work. They're handmade by my daughters and me, and they're available on our website, robynonthefarm.com. I've been milling my own flour and baking fresh milled flour breads for more than 20 years. If you're looking for more easy recipes like this, be sure to check out the other recipes I have on my channel. I'll be adding lots more. Thanks so much for being here with me on Robyn on the Farm. I'll see y'all next time.
Robyn's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that dough. With flour on her apron, loving each knead, ground wheat fresh.